Okay, so today I've come down to Horseshoe Lake and I've come to meet the guys from Pallatrax. In the background, we've got Tim and he's doing a bit of casting. We're going to find out a little bit more about the stone system. So I'm going to pass you over to Tim because we'll find out exactly how far these stones can actually cast.
All right, so today we're at Horseshoe and I've come to show basically that some of the misconceptions about how far you can cast a stone are really quite unfounded, because a stone is just a weight. So this particular stone is 3 ounces. I'm using gamma line on the reel, which I think is 0.33, which is around 20 pounds, give or take an ounce, in breaking strain. So pretty standard carp gear. It's not a huge reel. It's a 2 3/4 pound rod. So it's standard carp fishing equipment. And for the most part, you can cast as far as you need to. Yes, if you want to cast to the horizon, you may need a heavier test curve rod and you may have to use a bigger stone. But for most people, I can prove to you today that you can cast this more than adequately out into the water. So I don't know if you want me to just go ahead and cast. Right, here we go. I'm going to go for what I call a standard cast, not trying to cast too far, but just accurately, and show that this is a reasonable distance. Now, I don't know, are we going to measure this cast, Luke? Yeah. All right, so that was just what I called a good steady overhead thump. I've actually tightened the line so we get an accurate distance. There's no slack there. So I shall wind it in through some of this weed at Horseshoe, which there's plenty of. Now I'm guessing that that was probably around 75 yards with just a standard overhead thump. Wasn't trying to achieve a silly distance. We can step it up in a minute just to show what can be achieved, but it's not impossible to cast. I mean, I've cast a 4 ounce stone and measured 135 yards, so I know how far they can cast. So if we go over to the sticks and actually measure this, we'll see how far that just standard overhead cast was. Three, 24, nearly 25. Now that surprised me because I didn't think I'd cast that far, because I wasn't trying, and across water obviously it is a little bit it's hard to sometimes appreciate how far you're actually casting. But nearly 25 wraps, so nearly 100 yards. Which is not bad for just a standard, what I call overhead thump with a stone and a boilie. So I reckon if I had a method ball on that, I could probably cast 100 yards with a method ball. And do many people need to cast further than that? I'm not sure they do. So with the first cast, standard overhead thump, standard carp fishing equipment, 2 3/4 pound rod, gamma main line, which was 0.33, which is about 20 pounds breaking strain. Shimano bait runner, it's not a big pit reel, so very standard setup. Hit the best part of 100 yards, all barring about 2 foot. So that was with a standard cast. This time I'm going to give it a little bit more, and let's just see how much I can try and achieve with this setup. Got a bit of a side wind now, so that's probably affected the distance a little bit. But I'm going to give it another go because I feel like I could have done better. What I'm trying to prove here is I'm not a tournament caster, I'm just a carp angler. Well, a fisherman stroke carp angler. So I'm not trying to do any elaborate cast that anyone else can't do, but I am giving it a bit of welly this time. So let's just see if I can improve a little bit on that original distance. Well, based on that first cast and this one, maybe 120. Now, how many people need to fish at that distance? That's a stone. It's nothing fancy. People say you can't cast a stone a long way. Well, I think we've just proved that you can cast them far enough. And I have done a measured cast on what I call more casting type equipment with a heavier rod and a big pit reel of just over 135 yards. So yes, you can cast a stone. So let's have a quick measure of this and see where we got to.
So we've just wrapped that out, and typically as we wanted to start doing some bigger casts, the wind's actually picked up and is coming straight into our face. But even with the wind in our face, Tim was still hitting about the 100-yard mark. And I've actually used these stones before. I used them in Belgium, but it was on quite a small lake, so I haven't actually had the chance to really cast them. So quite fancy going myself. So I'm going to see what I can do. As you guys know, I'm a pretty average caster, so if I can hit about 80 yards, then I'm sure you guys can easily do that and some. Right, so I've got exactly the same setup as what Tim was using. So let's give it a go. See what sort of distance I can hit. Oh, it's gone a little bit high. All right, let's clip that up and get it back through all the weed. All right, so I don't think that was as far as Tim. I reckon it was probably about 80 yards. So let's wrap it out and have a little look. So 19 and a half wraps, so near enough 80 yards. I thought it was around that. But I think for a first cast, a bit of wind coming in, I'm pretty happy with that. So that just shows that you can cast a stone. 80 yards on the majority of waters is more than enough. So let's bring this back in, find out some of the other benefits of the stones.
Right, one of the advantages of the stones is how it can be used as a method feeder. Now, I've fished a method now for probably 20 years, and I find it very successful. I've caught carp to over 60 pounds. I've caught big barbel, big chub, big tench, big bream, all on the method. And the method is a fantastic form of getting attractiveness into your swim without necessarily feeding the fish, and therefore hoping that they'll eat that bit, the important bit, bait and hook. But you must load it properly. So mixing the ground bait properly, I always put some in the palm of my hand and place the stone in it and mould it round the bottom half. I then take some more and mould it round the top half. What is important is to keep it centered by keeping the line tight. If you have the line coming off at an angle, when you pick it up, it will start ripping through the method ball, and it will fall off when you go to cast it. What I'm trying to do here is shape it so it is a little bit aerodynamic. So now I've got the method, I'm squeezing it on quite tight. I don't particularly like my method to break up quickly. Match anglers, who probably were the ones who developed method fishing, they like it to break up quickly. But I'm fishing for a couple of bites, whereas they're fishing for lots of bites. I want this to sit there, and I want the fish to come in and be aggressive and feed on it. And hopefully when they find this, they'll suck it in and eat it. What you can do is get your hook bait and just press it into the side like that. And I now know when I cast that, it won't tangle, can't tangle. I can actually cast that into a weed and it will present. So it is the perfect system for fishing. I can't fault it. I've caught so many fish on it, it's ridiculous. So there, stone with a method ball wrapped around it. I know I can cast that 100 yards. I'll cast that as far as I cast the stone. So there you have it, a method ball wrapped around the stone. So as you can see, that hit the clip, which was the same as when I was just casting a stone. So I've now added ground bait, which has given me far better chance of getting a bite. Method, can't be beaten. Anyone who says that it can be hasn't tried it enough. It's a fantastic way of catching carp and tench and bream and chub and barbel. Fish like ground bait, especially when it's good ground bait. Don't ever be conned into thinking you can use cheap ground bait. It's just better to use good ground bait. So another great tactic with the stone is to wrap it in paste. Right, that's just a standard boilie paste, which you can match the hatch obviously to the hook bait you're using. Right, take a bit of paste. Again, try and mould it so that you make an aerodynamic shape. The beauty of this is that when it breaks down, you're obviously just left with a stone, not a false bit of plastic or like a feeder or a lead. It's a stone, a natural stone that the fish, especially if you're fishing in gravel pits, come across all the time. They're digging around in stones. They're not scared of stones. You've got no reason to be scared of that stone. So again, I can force that bait just into the side, right? So it becomes very aerodynamic. And that'll slowly break down, leaking attractions into a swim over a bit more time than the method feeder, right, or the method ground bait, should I say. So look at that, perfect, nice bomb-shaped ball of paste, wrapped around a stone, a natural stone, right, can't tangle, hook bait's just pressed into the side of the paste. So let's see how this one casts, see if I can hit the clip with that one as well. Well, that hit the clip quite hard, so that would have probably gone another 10 yards on top of that. So you're looking at, what, Luke, that was probably 110 based on the previous cast. So very good tactic, a little bit different than most people are using. Stone held that paste on beautifully. So give it a go, it's a winning tactic.
Okay, so that's the casting out of the way. I've got Simon sat down here and we're going to find out a few of the questions that you guys are probably going to ask about the stones. So firstly, where did the concept come from and why? Why have you created these stones?
I think if you look back through the history of my fishing, whether it's boat fishing in Bermuda or fly fishing all over the country, etc., etc., but one of the things that really influenced my fishing was match angling, where everything was about scaling down, being unobtrusive. I used to own some lakes in Dorset, Pallington Lakes, and we had, one of the lakes was a trout lake with a load of carp in it. And I've always loved the method, that approach, really, really high grade ingredients. And I was catching lots of fish out of that lake when we opened it as a carp fishery. But slowly the catch rate went down. And one day it was almost like a eureka moment that I knew my method mixes and my food baits were really high quality. But when that method mix broke down, right next to my hook bait was this rather large, obtrusive lump of metal and plastic, to be quite honest, lead and plastic. So we're all trying to be unobtrusive. And here I was fishing right next to my hook bait with something that's exactly the opposite. The eureka moment was, it was a gravel pit. Would a stone do the same job as a natural weight? So would it cast and would it hold place? But would it also be a method feeder? So when it broke down, it was just a stone, a natural, unobtrusive stone. Made some stones, big lumps of sandstone back in those days. And to be quite honest, it's just revolutionised our fishing. We just started catching more fish and it was a real kind of light bulb moment. It made so much common sense. And then obviously there's a whole rake of other benefits that came in on top of that, just that simple, natural, unobtrusive, almost like if you think about it, if you accept a stone is just part of the fish's environment, trying to think like a fish, why would they spook off a stone? They're much more likely to spook off something man-made.
Okay, so you say they're unobtrusive. So do you truly believe that they're more unobtrusive than using a lead? And in a whole wealth of different scenarios as well. So obviously different types of lakes. Obviously you mentioned gravel pits, they're going to be littered with stones, but maybe more in clay-based lakes or something like that. Do you still believe they're as unobtrusive as...
Our mantra at Pallatrax has always been to innovate, has always been to question everything, assume nothing. And so by questioning the camouflage man-made and the ability for fish to sense things that are alien within their world, without a doubt, 1000%. And if you look about it, you know, the amount of times the British record barb was caught, the huge amount of carp we've caught, tench, bream, the list goes on and on. The common denominator we're removing is that man-made piece of metal and plastic, whether it's a method feeder or whether it's a straightforward lead. And it's actually, when you think about it, really, really does become common sense that if you use part of the fish's environment as the weight, it has to be an advantage.
So since working with you today, I've noticed obviously the stones are very varied in terms of colour, but I guess that means they're actually more camouflage than what a camouflage lead would be.
Well, the truth of the matter is the camouflage aspect of a lead or a method feeder is a human psyche. You know, we're painting something green or we're speckling it with paints, etc. It doesn't replicate anything in nature, so it's not truly camouflaged. The irony, I suppose, with stones is the fact is they are totally camouflaged regardless of the colours. So the colours of the stones, they're British stones, they come from this country, they fit in with stones across the board. So the truth of the matter is the colour, I suppose the question should be, is why aren't leads, if they're trying to camouflage them, the same colour as stones?
Yeah, it's definitely a different take on it, and you've almost got to take yourself out of the situation and out of what you've been told all this time to actually see it, I think. So yeah, it's definitely, it's a new look on things, and it makes perfect sense.
That's all we're trying to do. We're not here to tell anybody how to fish. We're looking for edges and advantages to fish, you know, responsibly, but at the same time catch more fish. So by, you know, not suppressing ourselves from innovation, looking around us, we're not trying to say we're replicating a lead, because we're fishing on a bespoke angling tool, something that does the job of a lead or a feeder, but so much better. And we honestly believe we've proven that beyond all reasonable doubt in our own fishing. And I think if people were more questioning, they came outside of the box and the trends that are peddled in the industry and in the sport today, as you rightly say, it just makes common sense. It is just but a stone doing that job with a host of other benefits.
So in terms of size, how do they compare to a lead?
Basically twice as large. So a 2 ounce lead would be half the size of a 2 ounce stone. The irony there is that's a frequently asked question, so it's a good question, but it doesn't matter how big that stone is in with the fish's environment. The fact is that lead will always be alien. A method feeder will always be alien. And to be quite honest, that leads you then to question the density of lead. By having to use lead, we're therefore by default forced to accept the density of lead. We believe without a shadow of a doubt, lead in many times can be far too dense. If you're fishing it into weed, if you're fishing it into silt, you know, I call it the welly boot effect. If you put a lead out there, it'll sink into silt, and then for a fish to actually extract that out, it has to pull a lot of force. And we know time and time again that fish are spitting out that hook and using actually that added density as to their advantage and to our disadvantage.
So the bigger the stone in some ways is actually quite beneficial.
Without a doubt.
As long as it casts, which we've obviously seen earlier that they do cast.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions we get asked quite frequently. And yeah, they cast fantastically well, and you've got all those other benefits. So it's so much more than a standard weight for so many reasons. And like I say, if you really drill down into it and really look at it and really want to question it, you'll end up with the same conclusions as us. We're not trying to hoodwink, we're not trying to gimmick. We're very, very forward-thinking anglers, and it has genuinely revolutionised our fishing, because by accepting how fish sense things, it then starts you to, we can't think like fish, of course, but it does start you to go down that track where you try to think like fish. You start to appreciate how they sense things, whereas we look at how they see things. You know, they can, changes in water pressure, tastes on water, all those things, that's where we really come from.
So you mentioned flavour earlier and how fish pick up flavours in their surroundings and that sort of thing. And I've seen that you've got a little tub of stones in liquid. Can you tell me why?
Again, we found, without a shadow of a doubt, fish will home in. We call it cooking the bacon. So if you can imagine, you're sat in your lounge and there's some bacon that suddenly gets cooked in the kitchen, that smell, that entice you to salivate to find it. And we do the same with stones. Because the stone's porous, it will take on a water-based flavour. So we leave our stones soaking in these, and then when we cast them out, we know that there's traction within the swim around the hook bait, leaching out very, very slowly from that stone. So again, it's just all about edges. It's all about using that tool the best we possibly can.
So how long, I guess it's liquid dependent, but how long would you say that attraction would leach out of the stone for?
It takes, you'll bring it in the next day, so to speak. We'd like to think we catch a lot quicker than that, but you will bring it in the next day and it'll still smell. It's stained into there the longer you leave it. And then so we'll just replace them every cast. We'll put one back out, which is really, really strong again, straight out the pot. And like I say, we'll wrap the method mix around it or the paste. And when it breaks down, it's all about bringing them in. And when they're in there, there's not a great lump of obtrusive man-made. And so when you're using all these advantages, your odds have to go up. I say there is zero gimmick to anything we do.
So you're basically just building up layers of attraction, whether that's through liquid, through ground baits and that sort of thing. It's just layer upon layer, so it just constantly...
Exactly. I think there's many a time, and I'd have been guilty back in the early days, you forget how does a fish find your bait? You know, how does it find it at night, for example? So if you've got something like a stone which you can stain with a flavour, we know fish find things through, yes, water pressure changes, all these different things and variables, but one thing they do, they get flavour on the air, on the water, like we get flavour on the air. So they literally home in on that flavour. So it's just another great advantage.
Okay, and probably the last thing to talk about is the elephant in the room, and that is lead toxicity and why, another reason that you've created the stones.
Yeah, it is a bit of an elephant in the room because obviously the industry and the trends within fishing have always been around lead and plastic and obtrusive. Lead is toxic. There's loads of information and research, and they say even recently Catalonia banned lead in fishing, and it looks like a lot of European countries now will follow. The fact is that we ended up with the stones with all of its angling attributes, and also the fact it is totally non-toxic. Even the bond and the stainless steel swivel, totally non-toxic. So it is a genuine win-win. We've ended up with a far more versatile angling weight than we've had available to us, and it's non-toxic. As I say, it's a genuine win-win.
Cool, so it sounds like you're pretty confident with them. Sounds like you wouldn't turn up to a venue without them.
No, I mean, we don't fish with man-made, you know, whether it's lead or zinc or anything, because it's man-made and it's the largest. To be quite honest, it's the common denominator. You go around lakes, everybody's fishing with leads and we're fishing with stones. And why are we catching more fish? It's not that we're fantastic anglers. It's the fact is that we have stripped away that really obtrusive piece of terminal tackle and replaced it with something natural. So our confidence is high with no arrogance, but also our confidence would be really, really low if we had to go back to the old ways. You know, we're very forward thinking. We want to be innovative. We want to bring genuine edges so people can catch more fish in a very responsible manner. That's what the stones brings to the party.